Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with another picture of my asshole. This time really zoomed out once again to block anything naughty from being seen. We're back! Dark Souls 2, the way FromSoftware intended. I'm assuming that y'all have seen either episode 1 with the bad audio or episode 2 where I talk way too slow and have bad audio. Or maybe, the title of this one tells you all you need to know. Today, we're looking at the official guidebook for Dark Souls 2 by Future Press to see exactly how FromSoftware intended you beat the game. Now, Future Press does state that they did work directly with FromSoftware to write this guide, so unless Miyazaki comes down from the heavens to deliver a definitive way to beat it, this is probably the closest we will ever get to an intended way of beating these games. Real quick before we get started, I also wanted to mention that this is my first time ever playing Dark Souls 2, so if I miss something or if literally none of my jokes land because these videos rely like 99% on my prior knowledge of the game, just shut up. Right off the jump, as these books typically begin, they give a brief overview of the game mechanics and systems, as well as touching on the starting classes and gifts. Similar to the guides for Dark Souls 1 and 3, they don't give a definitive best class, but do say that the Knight is a solid choice for players who plan to focus on melee, but also want to incorporate miracles at some point. For our starting gift, they recommend that new players, that's us, choose the healing set for an early game boost, and do note that all other items can be acquired through normal means of gameplay. They also say that advanced players may want to choose the Bonfire Ascetic, which essentially sets a specific area to New Game Plus mode, but look at me. Do I look advanced? Fuck no, give me the heals. Chapter 2 is the area guide, which is the bulk of the book and the main thing I'll be focusing on, so if you require a more detailed description, buy your own damn guide. Before leaving the dried up whorehouse, they say to be sure to grab the human effigy from upstairs, then head forward into Majula. Here, we meet the Emerald Herald, aka the Firekeeper, who gives us the Estus Flask and tells us to go see King Vendrick, and then refuses to elaborate at all. The guide says to cruise around the Jula, speaking to any and all NPCs hanging around, and to grab every item in the area, of which they specifically name the Morning Star on the side of the cliff, and the Silver Eagle Kite Shield from Moglin. After getting suited up with a weapon that we cannot properly wield, they say to head into the game's first real area, the Forest of Fallen Giants. Now, I got this guide off eBay pre-owned, and it was questionably wet on some pages, but I'm choosing to ignore that. But thankfully, the previous owner of the guide added some of their own notes to the margins, such as first through second, and a circled 10, tit with nip, circled 12, arrow down, circled 12, a very bold S, giant/POR, and a circled 10, and soldier key. What any of those mean? Great question. Maybe we'll find out together. Once inside the FOFG, they say to kill the Hollow Infantryman in the first area, as well as the Hide Knight for a, quote, very powerful early weapon. We then need to progress as normal up to the Merchant Hag Melintia, whom of which we need to purchase the key to Lennygrass Shack, as well as the Traveling Merchant Hat for an increase to our item discovery. Once we are styling and profiling, limousine riding, and jet flying, we need to grab the Fire Longsword from the cave below, meet up with Cartographer Kale to get the house key, and climb the ladder to fight the Pursuer. They don't outright say that we need to fight him right now, and do note that he is really difficult at this stage in the game, and to only take him on if we are confident in our abilities. Tip-wise, the only real noteworthy thing that they mention is to circle around his shield side and wait for him to miss an attack, then follow up his whiff with an attack of our own. Once the Pursuer is either killed or vanishes, they say to open up the shortcut back to the bonfire, then use a Pharaoh's Lockstone to unlock the contraption, giving us the Chloranthy Ring and a Titanite Slab. Continuing along, we now need to meet Mild Mannered Pate, grab the halberd from the stone sword on the ledge, unlock another shortcut back to the bonfire, and take on our first real boss, the Last Giant. And here I was thinking he was the first one. The guide is shockingly not very helpful when it comes to this fight, and the only real tips they provide are to summon Pate and circle behind the giant if possible. Other than that, we're pretty much on our own. Alternatively, they do mention that staying further away will prompt the giant to do his long arm swipe attack, which also leaves him fairly open to punish, but whatever gets the job done. With the giant fell and the soldier's key now attached to our janitor's keyring, we need to grab the Ring of Regeneration from the chest below and prepare for another fight with the Pursuer. Wait, where is he? Okay, well, apparently if we kill him on the first encounter, like we did, he just doesn't show up again, which is a-okay with me. They now say to interact with the giant bird nest to get carried to the Lost Bastille, where we need to grab the covetous silver serpent ring and the antiquated key from the chest, just ahead of where we touched down. In a later page, they also say to be sure to speak to Lucatiel of Mira so that we can summon her for an upcoming boss fight, but I wasn't really sure how to put that in the script, so I'm just putting it here. Once we do that, we can warp back to Majula and make our way to the next area, Hyde's Tower of Flame. Hyde's Tower is pretty much a straight shot from beginning to end, with the only real noteworthy things being to grab the Sublime Bone Dust from the Old Knight with the mace, hit both levers to raise the platforms for the Dragon Rider fight, and grab the extremely important Ring of Binding. With those relatively simple tasks out of the way, we can now make our way up to the cathedral to take out Wish.com Ornstein. The guide mentions the similarities between the old and older Dragon Slayers and notes that instead of wielding the powers of lightning, old Dragon Slayer now uses the power of dark to stomp our dick firmly into the dirt. Aside from just staying behind him, the guide says to roll into his attacks and punish when we can, and that if he starts to gather his dark energy, to cheese the fuck out of there as fast as humanly possible. They also say to be careful around the obstacles in the room since it's pretty easy to get caught on a pew, and that if we can, to try to keep him towards the center of the arena. With the old Dragon Slayer down, we now need to make our way to the other side of the area and take out the new Dragon Rider. How this fat fucker's riding dragons is beyond me, but anything is possible in Drangleic. For this fight, the guide says to once again try to circle around his backside and only attack after he misses, at which point we should follow up with as many as we can muster. That is literally it. Just raise the platforms and hit it from the back. With Dick Rider out of the picture, they say to now make our way to the, hold up, bowels of the tower, and take the elevator down to speak to Mira once again, then proceed into No Man's Wharf. Oh shit, I forgot to mention this before, but one handy thing that this guide does is list the recommended level for each area on the first page of that area, with No Man's Wharf being 35 to 45, Hyde's Tower being 30 to 40, and Forest of Fallen Giants being 10 to 20. Granted, the Dark Souls 3 book was written by Prima Games and not Future Press, but even in that one and the Dark Souls 1 guide, I was kind of shocked to see that they don't ever really talk about level throughout any of these guides. Future Press did a fantastic job with the Elden Ring guide, going as far as to list the recommended weapon levels for each boss, but even in that one, they never really talk about character level. It doesn't really matter all that much, but it is something I wanted to mention. Anywho, cruising into No Man's Wharf, we have yet another helpful tip from the previous owner of the guide, which says, get shadow armor from boss's friends. Once again, what that means? Still not sure, but I did notice that he spelled armor the non-American way, so that's something. This is another area that is more or less a straight line, with the guide really just saying to run here, grab this item, run here, kill these enemies, grab this other item, congrats, you're at the boss. The first notable thing they say to do is to speak to Lonesome Gavlin and exhaust his dialogue, then pull the lever to signal the ship to dock. Once we do that, we need to grab the Estus Flask Shard from the chest, unlock the shortcut, meet Carhillion of the Fold, and rest back up for our impending fight on board the ship. They say to be sure to clear out any enemies on or around the ship before summoning in Lucatiel, as this greatly reduces the likelihood of her getting bumped into the water and dying before making it to the next boss, the Flexile Century. The guide seems to heavily focus on the spiked club side, so just about every tip they provide completely ignores its curved sword counterpart. They say to use the pillar in the middle of the room to impede the Century's movement, and to dodge into his attacks to open windows for us to deal damage. Alternatively, they do mention that the easiest method is to use fire bombs and throwing knives, and say that it costs souls, but it gets the job done. Difficulty-wise, the Flexile Century isn't anything to write home about, so once we finish off the Conjoined Circus rejects, we need to interact with the weird map device in the heart of the ship and make our way to the Lost Bastille's back entrance. I also wanted to bring up that the guide does not mention using a torch a single time throughout this area. Not with the general lack of light, not with the Darkstalkers, nothing. Just go straight Helen Keller and talk with your hips. Entering the Lost Bastille through the boat entrance and not the bird ride places us at the dock just outside the prison cells, which we need to progress through to hit the first bonfire. Once we do that, they say to kill the Hyde Knight just outside the door, grab the Estus Flask Shard from the chest in the back of the skinny hidden hallway, and get the explosive barrel to break the wall, leading to another secret bonfire and Steady Hand McDuff. The guide does mention using the antiquated key to unlock the door, leading to another Pharaoh's contraption that essentially skips the entire area, which is obviously not recommended, so for right now, we need to book it back up the steps and make our way to the Ruined Sentinels boss fight. This is the first of many multi-boss boss fights in Dark Souls 2, which, at least in my opinion, are not nearly as unforgiving as others in the series. The formula that I'm noticing is that they will usually have one boss that will rush you right out the gate, which in the case of the Sentinels you can take out before even seeing the other two, after which, if you have a summon, it just becomes a 2v2. They do say to summon Pilgrim Belclair, who absolutely ripped ass at first, but quickly ignored the divide and conquer approach and instead opted for a more, tank and destroy fighting style. Tip-wise, they say to take out the first sentry as quickly as possible before dropping to the main floor, after which we should always try to keep the other 2 sentinels in our line of sight and only attack after each miss. I do think that tip was mainly meant for solo players because in the immediate next paragraph they say that if we have Pilgrim Belclair, that things will be much easier. Regardless of your choice to solo or summon, after the fight we need to activate all the hidden doors around the room, which, despite my Dark Souls senior citizen status, I did not realize that hidden door does not mean illusionary door. It means you just have to go around and click A on walls that give no prompts and are otherwise completely unsuspecting. Once we loot the area and hit the bonfire, we need to unlock the contraption that reveals the way to Belfry Luna, ring the bell, and head into another multi-boss boss fight with the Belfry Gargoyles. Look, okay, I know Dark Souls 3 gets a lot of shit for reusing old assets, but this is getting a little ridiculous too, alright? We're like 6 bosses in, and 2 of them have been recycled. For this fight, the guy says that this is essentially a damage race, and that we need to take out each gargoyle as fast as possible before the next one summons in. To do so, they recommend using spells, or for us Unga Bunga melee users, Aromatic Ooze to deal magic damage, which, fun fact, cannot be equipped with the Fire Longsword. They also suggest using throwing knives to take out weakened gargoyles from a distance, and to focus on finishing them off one at a time to avoid getting overwhelmed. Each gargoyle isn't necessarily the toughest one-on-one, so it is worth it to eat a few axes to the face if it means taking one out for good. They finish off by saying that in summary, weapon buffs, range attacks, a good shield, and upgraded armor are all very useful here. Not gonna lie, I kinda forgot you could upgrade armor in this game. Once they are taken care of, we need to warp back to Majula to level up our shit, then head into Huntsman's Copse and the Undead Purgatory. Level 55 to 65. The previous owner once again graced us with his presence with a pinned-in note reading Int and Faith 20+, which is referring to our boy Falcon, who is making sure that this stone wall doesn't move again when he turns his back. If we speak to him with at least 8 points in intelligence and faith, he will sell us a few items, and if we speak to him again with 20 brains and Bibles, he will give us the Sunset Staff and a few pieces of the Hexer's Armor. Seeing as we don't have either of those requirements, and probably never will, he is more or less dead to us, so on to the bonfire. There isn't much between the first and second bonfires besides a few perfectly ultimate great moths, which the guide suggests taking out with a bow, then hitting the second bonfire and knocking down the tree for a shortcut. After that, we need to progress as normal up to the Undead Purgatory, where we are faced with a red phantom and another fog wall. To my surprise, the guide suggests shoving the greatsword wielding phantom off the side of the bridge, but I couldn't really get him to play along, so I just had to do it the old-fashioned way. Once he's dead, we need to grab the Sublime Bone Dust and Fire Seed off the ledge, then head inside to kill the Executioner Chariot. See, up to this point, I had been straight cruising the Drangleic streets, and I was feeling pretty confident. That was until this stupid horse fuck entered the picture. Guide-wise, they say that this fight is part puzzle, part battle, which is fair to some extent. In essence, we need to run in, hit the switch at the end of the tunnel to close the gate, which will cause the chariot to crash and allow us to fight it mano-y-mano, or mano-y hoof. What I was not prepared for are these fucking skeleton bastards and just how much of a pain in the ass they are to deal with. The entire way down the hall, they will attack and respawn indefinitely until we take out the necromancers that are bringing them back to life. And getting to the necromancers and avoiding the chariot is not that hard, but the inconsistencies and like unpredictable nature of the skelly bones makes me wish that I was the one in the fucking trolley debacle. Please, for the love of God, run me over. I'm begging you. If/when you do manage to make it to the lever and hit it, boy fucking howdy, you better stand clear because the dust cloud from the chariot crashing alone will grab you and throw you 80 feet in the other direction, and there's nothing you can do about it. I know Dark Souls 2 gets a lot of heat for bad hitboxes, and unfortunately, I'm gonna have to agree on this one because this shit sucks. The guide does mention that the chariot will kill the skeletons when it comes by, and to try our best to keep them in the path of destruction, but it straight up takes like 3 passes of the chariot to kill a skeleton, so in my opinion at least, it is infinitely easier to just take them out yourself and just keep making your way to the necromancers. Once we get to the actual real boss fight, it's not a crazy challenge, though this is the first boss that I died to, so maybe I'm just huffing copium. The guide suggests a good shield once again, which we can use to block most of the horse's attacks other than the rear kick and charge attacks, which need to be dodged. They also say that when the horse goes for its dark breath attack, that's your chance to get behind it and deal some real damage. Rinse, repeat, and avoid the charge attack, and we are well on our way out of this dog shit area. All we need to do now is hit the bonfire after the chariot, speak to Titchy Green, grab these scattered items lying around the room, and return to the bridge approach bonfire in Huntsman's Copse. Wee woo, motherfucker! I forgot the line, hold on. Wee woo, motherfucker, I've got you now. Bad guy, don't buy. Woo! Returning to the cops, we now need to hit the lever to lower the bridge, giving us access to the second half of the area, and carefully take out the rogues that are trying to mug us. The guide does mention the bonfire in the little hut, but notes that we cannot access it until we get the undead lockaway key, which is like 100 yards from the door. So grab that, unlock the door, hit the bonfire, and introduce yourself to Cretan the Wanderer. He thanks us for unlocking the door and briefly notes that a man named Pate is actively trying to kill him, and that we should be cautious if we ever cross paths. Continuing along the ledges, we eventually get invaded by the dark spirit merciless Rowena? Big creepy scythe lady, who we need to once again convince to swan dive off the cliff, then make our way through the cave ahead to unlock another shortcut back to the lockaway bonfire. With the shortcut unlocked, we can now make our way back to the fog gate that we passed up earlier and take on the triple threat boss fight, the Skeleton Lords. They suggest killing the Scythe Lord first since he typically rushes you as soon as you enter the fog and spawns in the easiest of the 3 enemy types upon death, those being the curved sword skeletons. These are the same as the skeletons we've already been killing, and there's no necromancer to bring them back, so once they're dead for good. After cleaning up these stragglers from Scytheman, we should then focus on the Halberd Lord, who will spawn in thrusting sword skeletons once he is defeated. The guide says to take out the skeletons as they're crawling out of the ground to avoid getting overwhelmed and allow us to fully focus on the actual boss. The final lord will spawn in everybody's favorite bone wheel skeletons, which the guide labels as by far the most dangerous of the smaller enemies, and oh god, they ain't lying. Do you guys like my JR impression? I've been watching just an incomprehensible amount of Raw from like 1997. By God almighty, this sick son of a bitch! They don't provide a whole lot of combat tips, aside from just using the pillar in the room as cover, so this one is pretty cut and dry as far as the actual fight is concerned. Just try to time our dodges, wait for them to miss an attack to counter, kill the skeletons as they come in, and we are well on our way to Harvest Valley. Before entering the area, the guide says to adorn our highest poison-resistant armor and to stock up on common fruit and poison moss, which can be farmed from the great moths in the cave from earlier. Once we are mossed up from the ass up, we can head into Harvest Valley, hit the poison pool bonfire, meet Stone Trader Cloanne and exhaust her dialogue, and make our way down the cliff to collect a myriad of items all scattered across the stink clouds. Skipping over another typo on page 125, we need to grab the fragrant branch and smackdown stone from the cave before meeting back up with Lonesome Gavlin, who is just doing some Gavlin shit. With the branch in our back pocket, they strongly recommend warping back to the Servants' Quarters bonfire in the Lost Bastille to free Strayed, an NPC that exchanges boss souls for boss weapons. Because every game's gotta have one. Back in Vape Shop Valley, they say to continue taking out the mounted overseers with our bow, grab another fragrant branch and an Estus flask shard from behind the wooden wall, and join up with the Sun Bros if we're feeling froggy. With the grocery list of items collected from the valley, we can now head into Earthen Peak and take on the ever so handsome Covetous Demon. Oh, just look at him. The guide says that range capabilities are great for this fight, but also notes that melee users may want to just circle behind him and keep an eye out for his rolling attack. They also say that if we need to, we can shoot down the undead critters from the ceiling, which will fall to the floor and distract the demon for a few seconds, allowing us to get a couple hits in. However you decide to proceed, just take him out and hit the bonfire when it's done. Not a ton of nuance to this one. From the bonfire, we need to speak to Lucatiel once again to get the Ring of Steel Protection +1, then slowly make our way across the mannequin-littered bridges. For the most part, they suggest either straight up taking out each enemy with the bow, or at the very least, kiting them back into a room so that we can take them out one-on-one and avoid the fire from the mannequin archers. Eventually, we need to make our way to the outer ledge of the building to light the windmill on fire, which will pump the poison mist out of the next boss's room, allowing us to freely maneuver without the fear of inhaling secondhand smoke. From there, we need to meet and greet Laddersmith Gilligan and pay him 2,000 souls to lower a ladder to the lower platform, giving us another Pharaoh's Lockstone and some Twinkling Titanite. Man, this guy's fucking rad! I sure hope he lives in the next game! God damn it, the previous owner got a big ass coffee stain on this next paragraph, man. Take care of your shit. Continuing back into the tower, we need to speak to mild-mannered Pate to allegedly get some armor and weapons, which he did not give me, then take out our first mimic of the game. After killing the Sickle Phantom Lady at the top of the stairs, we need to unlock the secret door at point 17 to unlock the final bonfire of the area, then head into our next boss fight with Mytha, the Baneful Queen. For this fight, they recommend summoning in Jester Thomas and his super hot fire, as well as using a good shield to block Mytha's quicker attacks. God damn it, I keep trying to say it like fucking Daffy Duck. Mytha's quicker attacks. They say that we can pretty much ignore her going into the poison to heal, since it's borderline impossible to stop her from and doesn't really extend the fight by that much. They also note that our best opportunities to strike are after she misses a lunging attack, tail swipe, or head bomb, which I do not even remember her doing. Once Mytha is defeated, they explicitly say not to enter the Iron Keep, as this area is much harder than the Earthen Peak and we are way too underleveled to be trotting in just yet. Instead, they say to hit the first bonfire so that we can warp back later, then boogie back to Majula and make our way down the pit. To safely traverse the pit, we need to speak to Gilligan and have him build ladders to access the lower levels, which will set us back 16,000 souls, which is kind of a considerable amount at this point in the game. The guide does mention that we can descend to the bottom without Gilligan, but doing so requires the silver cat ring from the cat lady in Majula, which costs 13,000 souls, so it's up to you. The cat ring can be used anywhere, and the ladders are only here, and between you and me, I've had the cat ring this whole time. Whatever you choose, just work your way down, grab the lockstone from the corpse, and enter the Grave of Saints. Walking through the rat head-shaped doorway, they map out all of the Pharaoh's contraptions, but note that pretty much all of them are not worth spending our lockstones on, aside from the one at point B, which will lower the bridge so that we can cross. You're also supposed to get invaded by some asshole named Roy the Explorer, which also didn't happen, so I don't know what the hell's going on here. From the second bonfire at the top of the ladder, we need to make our way to the Royal Rat Vanguard boss room and take out the Royal Rat Vanguard, which is just a bunch of regular rats. Once we kill around 10 normal rats, the big cheese will emerge, which can be identified by his badass mohawk. Hell yeah, dude. That's fucking sick. The guide recommends using burst damage, whatever the hell that means, to take out the main rat and not worry about killing the other ones once the big one appears. They say that a total of 100 rats will spawn, but once we take out the main one, they will all retreat back into their caves, and it's way too much of a hassle to worry about taking them all out. Instead, they say to use the gravestones in the room to break them into smaller groups, and use alluring skulls if needed, allowing us to fully focus on the main rat. Once he is defeated, we need to progress through the room to meet the Rat King himself, who basically calls us a disgusting piece of shit and tells us to kick rocks, so glad we did that. Once again, jumping over another typo. Christ sake, Future Press, get it together. We need to grab the Bleed Stone and Disc Chime from the chest, then proceed further down the pit into the gutter. The gutter did the impossible and somehow rivals Blighttown as the most annoying fucking place in a Dark Souls game. Trying to navigate this area is bad enough, let alone trying to explain how someone else is explaining it through text. So to save us both the headache, I'm gonna just kind of gloss over this area. Basically, we need to make our way down a series of wooden platforms and death traps, all the while grabbing a handful of items, namely another fragrant branch of yore, then eventually hit the bottom to enter Black Gulch. There's really not much you're missing on this one. Once we are back on solid ground, we need to make our way through the dozens of statues, all shooting poison loogies at us, drop off the ledge to speak to Lucatiel, take out the elite giants in the cave below, and enter the fog gate to kill the first of the 4 old ones, the Rotten. The Rotten is a pretty straightforward fight, with the only tips they provide being to summon Lucatiel and stay behind him until around 50% HP, at which point he will do his Wrath of the Rotten move, which is just a big AoE blast. Pretty standard Dark Souls shit. They do note that both of his arms can be severed, and that we should try to focus on his cleaver arm first, then wail on his other arm, which will give us another Pharaoh's Lockstone. I don't really know how I managed to not sever either arm throughout this fight, so I'm gonna label this one as optional. Either way, just kill the nasty fuck and grab the Sublime Bone Dust after it's done, then light the Primal Bonfire, warp back to Majula, and make your way back to the Iron Keep. Immediately after crossing the bridge to the keep, we are greeted by 2 Alon Knights, which the guide suggests we bait forward with our bow so that we can fight them one-on-one. Entering the structure ahead, they say to carefully edge our way to the fire-spewing statue to grab the iron key, and meet Magarold of Lanafir in the room to the right, who allows us to... what the fuck does he do? Who has the ability to infuse our spells with incense, which will lower the required faith and intelligence of spells, but who needs spells when you got big, hunky muscles? Gah. Continuing into the area with the crisscrossing walkways, we first need to pull the lever to lower the bridge, make our way across it and take out the 2 Alon Knight captains on the other side, and grab the Dull Ember to bring back to Steady Hand McDuff back in the Lost Bastille. This will enable us to infuse weapons with status effects, which we can do if needed, but low-key, I've been rocking that fire longsword since I picked it up, so I'm gonna roll with that. We then need to continue along to the next lever to completely lower the bridge, shut off the valve that controls the fire, and enter the fog gate that leads to the optional and very deadly Smelter Demon. I don't really know how to explain this, but Smelter Demon is like the first boss of the game that has really felt like the Dark Souls bosses that I've come to know. Up to this point, most of the other bosses have felt either a little too slow, or a little too weak, or just not really responsive. For the most part, their movesets are pretty limited to like horizontal swing, vertical overhead swing, maybe the occasional ranged spell thing every once in a while. But I don't know, something just felt like off about them. Smelter Demon, on the other hand, is quick as shit, packs a goddamn punch, and just seems to fit in like perfectly with the other bosses from Dark Souls 1 and 3. And I'm sure someone is typing about how all of the bosses in Dark Souls 1 are slow and clunky and unresponsive, and I can't really even argue that. I'm just trying to share my opinion on the game so far, and this one feels really good. The other one's eh. Anyway, for this fight, they do say to summon Lucatiel, but do note that every summon that we bring in will increase the defense of the Smelter Demon. But in my opinion, having another body to tank some of the heat is well worth the extra defense. Phase 1 is pretty simple with him just swinging a big sword, but at around 75% HP, he will release his inner Heartburn, which will surround him in a firestorm that damages us when we're close. Phase 3 is where things really heat up, with the demon now imbuing his sword with the same fire that surrounds him, dealing even more fire damage than the already beefy 5-layer burrito hits that he's laying on us. The guide says to stay behind him and to dodge into his attacks to create openings, and that if we need a little extra boost, we can also bust out the aromatic ooze, dark resin, or gold pine resin for a little extra damage. They also say that for those that cannot dodge, to speak to Rosabeth, who I don't know who that is, to get the flame quartz ring, or alternatively use small orange bill burrs for a little extra fire resistance. Once the demon is down, we need to hit the bonfire ahead, then backtrack back to the boss room to fight the pursuer. This time, for real. The tips are obviously the same as last time since it's the exact same boss, so just circle around his shield side, wait for him to whiff an attack, and wail on him when he does. After killing him, we are awarded with the Ring of Blades +1 and the freedom to know that we never have to see this fucker ever again. Return to the bonfire, we need to progress up to Belfry Soul to ring the tower bell, make our way across the rooftops, and finally hit the last bonfire before taking on the Old Iron King. The first thing the guide says is to be wary of the giant hole in the floor and to always be careful to not fall in it mid-fight. I am assuming this is a personal paragraph to whoever had to collect the screenshots for this fight, so praying for you, King. They continue on by saying that the strategy for this fight is fairly simple, and that we should avoid locking on and dodge into his attacks at the last possible second. I don't really know what they think we've been doing to get this far, but okay, thanks. They also note that none of his physical attacks can be blocked, so we should double grip our stick since our shield is going to be pretty much useless this time around. Once again, aromatic ooze, gold pine resin, and dark resin are recommended for a little extra damage, but this fight mainly comes down to timing our rolls and baiting attacks that we can counter. With the Old Iron King now swimming with the fishes, the only thing left to do is loot the chest, hit the primal bonfire, and warp back to Majula to make our way into the shaded woods. Before entering the woods, we should cross paths with a man named Benhart of Jugo. Juggo? Juggalo? Juggalettes? Whoop whoop. We need to speak to him to progress his questline, then use a fragrant branch of yore to free Rosabeth of Melfia. That's who they were talking about earlier with the flame quartz ring. Rosabeth asks us for some clothes, which we regrettably need to oblige her with, in order to send her back to Majula, where she will offer to sell us some pyromancies. After helping the homeless and grabbing the Estus Flask Shard and Lockstone from around the joint, we need to hit the first and second bonfires ahead, then speak to Cretan once again to further his questline. There are a few branching paths ahead, but the guide notes that the only one we can really progress through is the one to the right, though they do mention the Shrine of Winter one, which costs a total of 1,000 souls to open. Oh wait, no, hold on. Oh. A million souls. Yeah, so the path on the right. They say that the Shaded Woods is extremely difficult to navigate due to the Silent Hill-ass fog covering the area, so we need to use the cliff walls as our guides so as to not get lost. First, following the wall to our left, we need to speak to the head of Vengarl in Pile of Rubble, then backtrack with the wall on our right until we come across two chests containing the Old Sun Ring and the Chloranthy Ring +1. The only enemies in this area are the two phantoms that roam around the center of the woods, which the guide suggests we do not kill since doing so will cause 2 additional phantoms to spawn for each one that we kill. Instead, we need to mind our business and make our way to the third bonfire in the Old Ruins, grab the Fang Key from the Lion Warrior at point 8, then drop down in the hole to speak to Man Scorpion Tark. To actually speak to him, we need the Ring of Whispers from Shaquille O'Neal back in Majula, which will allow us to speak to him and hear his plot to kill his wife. Is that real? Is that what this whole thing is about? Alright, fuck it, I'm in. After accepting the hit contract from Tark, we need to meet Darediver Grandlahat in the cave below, speak to reused character 003, Weaponsmith Ornifex, and send her back to Brightstone Kelv Seldora. Holy fuck, that's a mouthful. Then make our way to the boss room of Scorpionus Najka. The guide obviously suggests summoning in Tark and notes that melee users should not lock on to Najka, since having the ability to run around the arena freely is crucial for this fight. A good shield is super helpful, and they actually suggest not attacking her tails too much, since once they are severed, she will lose access to one of her slowest recovery moves and tends to be a little more aggressive once they're cut. Honestly, Tark kinda championed this fight, so if the cops come knocking, It's on him. I heard the man out, but I didn't touch her. After Naj goes down, we need to hit the bonfire, return to Tark to get the Fragrant Branch and Gesture, then proceed to the Doors of Pharos. Oh, also, for some reason they printed this paragraph twice, so typo alert again, I guess. Bad guide, still don't buy. The guide does say that the Doors of Pharos is an optional area and that we can more or less skip the entire thing and head straight to Brightstone Cove Seldora, but in doing so we miss out on a handful of items and a lot of lockstone, so it is certainly worth it to stop in right now. They say that the area was mainly designed for PvP and that the contraptions around the room are mainly just traps to use on other players, and the few that aren't only lead to shitty items. After hitting the first bonfire and progressing around the room anti-clockwise, counter, we need to follow the path to the second bonfire and take out the Royal Rate Authority. Yes, that is another typo. Come on, y'all. For the Royal Rat Authority, they suggest taking out the smaller rats as quickly as possible so that we can fully focus on the big dog and try to stay underneath him for the entirety of the fight. Other than using a good shield, the only real other tip they provide is to wait for him to use his Claw Swipes attack, at which point we should haul ass underneath and wail on his little leggies. At 20% HP, Ratman will start to limp and move slowly, at which point we should send him out with a bang. Just past the boss room, we need to speak to the Rat King again, as well as Lonesome Gavlin in the stairwell, then progress as normal to Brightstone Cove Seldora. After hitting the first bonfire in the tent, the guide does note that Benhard's summon sign can be found nearby, and that we should summon him to help us clear out the area. Other than a few enemies in the camp and a few spiders in the cave, we can pretty much run straight to the Fog Gate and take on the next area boss, Prowling Magus, and his congregation. They say that as soon as we enter the Fog Gate, we should focus on the Dark Cleric to our left and take him out as fast as possible to avoid him casting heals on Magus. I don't like saying that, Magus, it sounds like a slur. Once he and the other groupies are down, we can set our sights on Big Daddy Mag and just pretty much endlessly backstab him into oblivion if we so choose. This one is also pretty easy, not a lot of learning or memorization involved. Upon exiting the boss room, we need to climb the ladder and meet Cromwell the Pardoner, then continue into the cave to the next bonfire. From there, we need to ride the zipline to where Pate and Cretan are fighting, and per the guide's suggestion, help Cretan kill Pate. Allegedly, we were supposed to get Pate's armor and weapon back in Harvest Valley, but he didn't give it to me, so fuck that guy. At the bottom of the cave near the quicksand pit below, we need to meet back up with Ornifex in her workshop, where she can transform boss souls into boss weapons. Didn't the other dude already do that? Or is there two people that do this for some reason? Pressing on, we eventually come to the Fog Gate of the Duke's Dear Freya, and I assume you can figure out what we need to do with her. Firstly, the guide suggests summoning in Ashen Knight Boyd before heading in, and try our best to keep her in primo spit roast position. I cannot believe that made it into the final script. With Boyd hitting it from the front and us hitting it from the back, they say that we can pretty much ignore the parasite spiders and really just focus on smacking Freya in one of her two faces. They do note that she is super weak to holy water urns, but I forgot to restock, so I am once again labeling this as optional. This one is also pretty straightforward, just choose a head, lay into her, and try our best to dodge or block her attacks, all of which can be blocked, though they do note that they all deal very heavy stamina damage. Once Freya is dead, we need to head into the Lord's private chambers to take out the now hollow Duke Seldora, as well as Vingarl's body, which belongs to that dude in the rubble pile from earlier. With the killing spree now ended and the Brightstone key now added to our pockets, we can finally light the primal bonfire and GTFO the fuck out of here to make our way to Sinner's Rise. After entering the rise, we first need to hit the bonfire at the top of the stairs, take the elevator down the tower, and grab the Sublime Bone Dust from the alcove at point 6. They do note that Lucatiel can be summoned to help with the enemies ahead, but suggest clearing out the enemies before summoning her in, so that she is fresh and ready to go with our impending boss fight with the Lost Sinner. Feature Press drops a little bit of lore on this one and says that the reason the Lost Sinner eternally punishes herself in her cell is because she failed to relight the first flame using the souls of the Old Witches of Izalith, the best area in Dark Souls 1 that is notoriously loved for its polish and map design. As soon as we enter the Fog Gate, the Lost Sinner will immediately extinguish the light in the room, which will severely limit our lock-on range and make this fight way more difficult than it needs to be because the lack of light. I can't see shit out of this thing. To combat this advanced darkness, they say to return to the bonfire after clearing out the area, light a torch and pray that Lucatiel doesn't fall into the ocean, then proceed to either side of the fog wall to light the mysterious liquid that is just oozing out of the wall for whatever reason. Doing so will illuminate the boss room even after the Lost Sinner extinguishes the light, which will make this fight way easier than if we had just gone in blind. For For the actual fight itself, they suggest staying behind her at all times, and that solo players should try to bait her overhead smash attack, which will provide ample time to get a few hits in. Other than that and summon Lucatiel, there's not really a ton to this one. This is just another humanoid sword wielder, so there's only really so much strategy you can employ. Once the center is down, we need to grab the Fragrant Branch and Elizabeth Mushroom, also a callback to Dark Souls 1, then hit the Primal Bonfire and warp back to Majula. Jumping back to the Ruined Fork Bonfire in the Shaded Woods, we need to take one of the 2 untraveled paths leading to a locked door, which will now open since we have all 4 Great Souls, those belonging to the Rotten, the Old Iron King, the Duke's Dear Freya, and the Lost Sinner. This door will lead to Drangleic Castle, home of King Vendrick and Queen Nashandra, who sit atop the giant structure guarded by primal knights, royal swordsmen, and a seemingly never-endless supply of corrosive acid. They have like a whole room dedicated to it that's just on the floor. It's not even like in a jar or like something you could scoop, some Tupperware. After saying what's up to our girly Emerald Herald, we need to proceed up the steps and take out these stone soldiers near the golems that guard the door, which will power them up and grant us entry into the castle. Once we're inside, we need to hit up Chancellor Welliger for some new merch and a gesture, then buy ready for a fight with 2 royal swordsmen in the room behind the stairs. After hitting the first bonfire, we need to progress up and around the castle to another hidden bonfire in the tower above, then make our way to yet another double boss battle, this time with 2 dragon riders. At the start of the fight, the Black Dragon Rider will be perched above the arena with a bow and will constantly pepper us with arrows until we get the Red Rider to around 50% HP, at which point he will hop down and join the fray. Or if you just stray too close to his platform, apparently that also gets him down. Regardless of whether he stays up or not, the guide says to try to take him out as fast as possible, since he has significantly less health than the Red Rider and will be a constant nuisance while he's alive. In the inevitable instance that you're getting tag teamed by both riders, they say to try to counter their missed attacks and to circle around them to hit them from behind. Other than there being 2 of them, this is quite literally the exact same fight as before, and there isn't really much to note that hasn't already been said. Circle around, try to dodge into them, and keep an eye on both, and you should be just fine. Once the Dragon Riders are down, we need to hit the bonfire, speak to Jugo, ride the elevator up to get the key to King's Passage, and ignore the man that is chained upside down. He'll be fine. We'll come back to him, I swear. Riding the lift back down, we can now use the key to enter King's Passage and take on, by far, the coolest boss of the entire game, the Looking Glass Knight. His armor design, perfect. His setting, immaculate. His summoning people through the fucking shield thing, I'm gonna come. For this fight, they recommend summoning in Jughead once again, since LGK has some absolutely bonkers-ass defense, an impenetrable shield, and not only the ability to summon in NPCs through a shield, but whole-ass other players. This fucking fight rules. They suggest circling behind him and or waiting for him to aggro on Jugo, at which point we should slip in behind and get in as many hits as we can. They say to use a good shield and that our best opportunity to get in some hits is when he's charging his lightning rod, no innuendo there, and if he goes to summon a phantom in, that all playstyles should keep their distance and try to focus on the phantom. Ideally, Mr. Glass will stay with Jugo, allowing us to take on the summon one-on-one, after which we can return to the fight and finish him off together. After he is bested, we can progress down the lift to what I've been told is the worst area of the game, the Shrine of Amana. I have no doubt that this area fucking sucks, but following the guide's suggestion and using a bow to kite, or in most cases just snipe each enemy to death, made this place so much easier than I was expecting. I vividly recall my friends Chase and Jake telling me about how shitty Shrine of Amana is, since at any given time there's like 3 mages shooting shit at you, you're dick deep in water, and to make it even worse, there's just like underwater sheer cliffs that you can just walk off of, which will force you to do it all again from the beginning. Thankfully, with an upgraded bow, I was pretty much able to take out each enemy in the area without even really drawing the fire of the other ones, letting me cruise straight through to the oldie but goldie Seaman of Dawn. Reverse that. Demon of Song is another boss that has an impenetrable hide and only a few select areas that we can deal damage, those being his arms and face when he peels back his foreskin. The guide says that regardless of playstyle, the best strategy is to bait his long reach arm attack, which will leave him wide open to get a few hits in. Other than that, they note that all of his attacks are more or less unblockable since they deal such heavy stamina damage, and that we should only use a heavily upgraded Great Shield if we decide to use one at all. This one is just kind of slow, but not nearly as challenging as the Looking Glass Knight, so if you made it this far, you should be just fine. Killing the demon will award us with the key to the Embedded, which we need to take back to the top of Drangleic Castle to free the upside down prisoner, then get the Ring of the Dead from the MILF in in the cage. Once we do that and grab the last of the items in the Shrine of Amana, we can head forward into the Undead Crypt. Before venturing too far into the crypt, they do warn us to extinguish our torch before entering the room with Agdane and the other Grave Wardens, and that failure to do so will result in them relentlessly kicking our ass. Thinking I could weasel my way around this, I did keep the hollow with the torch alive, thinking that I'm not the one holding it, they'll attack him. Which did not work, and they kicked my ass. Other than a jester and some merch, Agdane doesn't really offer us much, though I do kind of wish I would have gotten my sins absolved before killing him. But, you know, there's always next time. Whatever the case, we now need to just make our way through the crypt past some of the most annoying fucking enemies I have ever had the displeasure of killing, hit the second bonfire, and enter the Fall Gate to kill Velstad, the Royal Aegis. Similar to all the other big-boned bastards we fought before, the guide says to try to get behind him and to dodge into his attacks when necessary. At 50% HP, Velstad will use his Underworld Beacon attack, which just gives his swing some extra dark damage and signals that he's going to use the Nether Blast range attack, which the guide says to bait for an easy victory. Once he is killed, we can proceed forward to meet King Vendrick, or what's left of him, grab the King's Ring, speak to the Emerald Herald, and warp back to the Ruined Fork bonfire to progress to Aldia's Keep. The guide does say that we can fight Vendrick right now, and doing so will give us a ton of souls, but without at least 4 souls of the giants, his defense will be multiplied substantially, and taking him out will take a lot of time and patience. Without any souls of the giants, his defense is 32 times the normal amount, which is cut in half for each soul of the giant that we possess. They say for the actual fight that Vendrick isn't really that difficult since his swings are so slow and telegraphed, but I couldn't even get him to aggro on me, so I just said fuck it and rolled out. Back in the Shaded Woods, we first need to equip our new King's Bling to enter the King's Gate, then hit the first bonfire in the dilapidated wooden building to the left of the stairs. After that, we need to say our goodbyes to Lucatiel, get invaded by Aslatiel, and make our way to one imprisoned royal sorcerer Navlin, which the guide fucking lied to me about. They start out by saying that Navlin is a unique NPC in that his dialogue will change depending on the state of our character, whether we are hollow or human. They explicitly say that if we speak to him while not hollow, i.e. human, that we will get his sane side and he will offer to sell us a lightly used Zuli the Witch cosplay, which he did. If you speak to him while you're hollow, he will be insane and will invade you like 5 times from now to the end of the game. I will admit, upon writing the script and rereading this section, they do say that speaking to him while human with his sane side, he will warn us about what we've done, but they do not say that that has the same outcome as if we had spoken to his insane side. So I don't know what the fuck they're talking about. I think we're both kinda to blame here, although I was gonna skip over this other typo, so maybe just think about that next time, Future Press, alright? And also, send me a free fucking guide. I'm tired of pretending like I don't want that. Anyway, back to what's important. We now need to progress down the hallway as normal, sniping bitches and sewing stitches all the way down to the room that houses Aldia's Key, which is of course filled with a fuck ton of corrosive acid. Taking the key back up top, we now need to unlock the door at the end of the hallway and make our way past the jumpscare ogres to the guardian dragon fight inside of what looks like a giant bird cage? I guess I don't really know what else you'd keep a dragon in, but you know, I'll allow it. For this fight, they say that the safest place to attack the dragon is from directly below it, since from this point, the only move we have to worry about is the stomp attack. When the dragon takes flight, they say to stay towards the edge of the cage, and for melee users to just play it safe until the dragon lands, at which point we should get back underneath it and start smacking on its legs. They also note that if we're able to try to sever the tail, since this will also open up a little bit of wiggle room behind the dragon. Once the guardian dragon is defeated, we can take the elevator up and make our way into Dragon Eyrie and the Dragon Shrine. Upon exiting the cave at the top of the lift, we once again need to speak to Uncle Harold for the Aged Feather, which is essentially just an infinite homeward bone that allows us to keep our souls, but still warp back to our nearest bonfire. From here, we need to drop off the cliff, hit the first bonfire, and make our way to another guardian dragon, which the guide says to kill, in order to weaken the upcoming dragon knights at the Dragon Shrine. They also recommend going through the first half of Dragon Eyrie twice, the first time to collect all the items, which requires us to break some eggs, and the second time to actually progress across the bridge to the shrine. If we happen to break 7 or more eggs, a dragon will swoop down and destroy the bridge, which is why they say to return to the bonfire after collecting all the items, which will respawn the eggs and allow us safely to traverse the bridge. There are a total of 3 dragons that we need to kill, 2 of which the guide says to get up close to and fight from behind, and a third that we can snipe with our bow from the overlooking cliff edge. Once all 3 dragons are slain, we can make our way across the bridge and up the stairs to the ancient dragon, who will give us the Ashen Mist Heart, which allows us to enter the memories of ancient beings. They do note that we can fight the ancient dragon right now, and doing so will award us with 120,000 souls, but it has by far the most health of any enemy, sitting at a cool 19,000. 8,000 HP. For reference, Vendrick is in second place at 11,000, so this one is gonna be a toughie if you choose to fight him. After a piss poor first attempt, I decided to put Big Dog on the back burner for now and instead head into the Memories of Ancients. I don't know who came up with the idea for this section, but goddamn, it sucks. They saw that one dream episode of SpongeBob and said, hold up, these white boys can cook. For the first and easiest memory, the guide says to return to the boss room of the Duke's Dear Freya, interact with the ominous purple crystal, which will transport us through time to the dragon memories. We do only have 5 minutes before getting kicked back to our reality, but there aren't any enemies here, and the only thing we need to do is grab the ancient dragon Great Soul from the ancient dragon, which will then kick us back to our timeline. The next 3 memories are all around the Forest of Fallen Giants, the first of which is accessed from the Withered Giant in the courtyard down the stairs from the Cardinal Tower bonfire. Inside the Memory of Vamar, they first essay to speak to Captain Drummond for a new gesture and to make his soldiers friendly, which was a goddamn lie, then progress down the path for another Soul of a Giant and a swift exit back to our reality. There goes gravity, great. Once again, starting from the Cardinal Tower bonfire. Ew, there's like fucking pizza roll grease all over this page, man, what the hell? Once again, starting from the Cardinal Tower bonfire, they say to make our way to the area right before the last Giant's boss room to speak to Benhart, then interact with another Withered Giant to enter the Memory of Oro. Inside this memory, we basically need to do the exact same thing and just make our way through some soldiers to another Soul of a Giant, then interact with the corpse to exit the memory. The final memory is located behind the King's Gate in the Forest of Fallen Giants. That's why they call it that, and will send us to the Memory of Jay, where we face off with the leader of the invading giants, the Giant Lord. For this fight, they say that we can summon either Benhart or Captain Drummond to assist, and that melee users should stick around the giant's feet since his attacks are pretty slow and not really that hard to dodge. They do mention that poison arrows can help with the boss's beefy health pool, but this one really isn't that heavy on strategy, just try to dodge and attack when you can. And with the Giant Lord's soul and giant kinship now in our possession, we can finally make our way to the final area, the Throne of Want deep inside Drangleic Castle, and take out Throne Defender and Throne Watcher. Thank God. Another double boss battle. Yippee. For the Throne Gang fight, they say that we can and should summon in Benhart, as well as the head of Vengarl to even the odds, then head through our final fog gate of our journey. Tip-wise, they say that the Throne Watcher has the least HP of the two, and as such is way easier to kill, but that the Throne Defender can revive her if she is killed too early. To combat this, they say to try to attack them both as equally as possible, and that poison is very helpful for keeping the pressure up on both. They also say that if you're skilled enough, that parrying is also viable, but I am not skilled enough, so With the help of Vengarl and Benhart, this fight isn't terribly hard, though it did take me a couple tries. And if you find yourself in a Watcher-Defender sandwich, they can really just kinda Donovan the fuck out of you if you're not careful. Once both defenders are down, assuming you have the Giant's Kinship item, the final fight of the game will automatically begin with Queen Nashandra in all of her demented and twisted glory. From the light reading that I did prior to taking on Nashandra for the first time, it seems that the overall sentiment towards this fight is kind of poor, with even the guide going as far as to say, you might imagine that the final boss of the game would be ridiculously hard, but she's not. They go on to say that the main point of this fight is to keep an eye out for the dark beacons, which we need to prioritize and destroy as soon as she summons them in. The beacons will constantly build up our curse meter, which will lower our total HP, so the guide suggests taking them out as fast as possible and to keep our human effigies on our hotbar. This is the final boss after all, so similar to the Dark Souls 3 guide, they say that there's no point in holding on to our effigies since this is the fight that we're saving them for. Attack-wise, they say that pretty much all of Nashandra's moves are pretty manageable, with the Curse Beam being very easy to sidestep and the Curse Swipe being dodgeable up close. Assuming you've died and resummoned them, or if you're just a Chad gamer and somehow kept them alive through both fights, Benhart and Head of Vengarl are also available to summon if needed, though I can't really promise they'll do a ton. To my understanding, there isn't really a phase 2, so aside from some varied scythe swings and the occasional curse laser, they say that the only other move we need to look out for is Nashandra's Wrath, which is just a big AoE blast that is turbo telegraphed by her chest glowing. To avoid this, we just need to roll away. That's it. And that is quite literally it. With Nashandra slain and Drangleic now free, or under our control, or whatever the fuck happens at the end of these games, we can now take the throne as the true monarch and usher in the age of prosperity, or allow Drangleic to further decay in the hopes that maybe one day a new kingdom will rise from the ashes. One of hope and bounty and goodwill towards men. I don't fucking know. Just fucking wrap it up. I'm done. And there you go. That's beating Dark Souls 2 the way FromSoftware intended. If you're a returning viewer, I want to say thank you again for coming back to the channel and checking out a new video. And if you're a new viewer, I want to say welcome to the channel. And if you're interested, I have very similar videos for Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 3, and Elden Ring. So if you fucked with this one and are interested in the guidebooks at all, you might enjoy those as well. Also, if you're feeling it, you can join the Discord with the link below and come say what's up to me and the other folks in there. It's a chill old place where we talk about video games, music, and there was cigarette chat there for a little bit that got really fucking annoying, so I nuked that. So that's not around anymore. We can talk about wrestling. That's, you know, Royal Rumble's coming up, so New Day's probably gonna be there. Maybe Logan Paul. I don't really fuck with him, but I will say that Coast to Coast Clothesline was pretty fucking sweet. Still a piece of shit though. But anyway, that's all the time I have. I gotta get back to playing Animal Crossing New Leaf on my Nintendo 3DS. So, I've been Aqua Sloth, you've been great. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you later. Alligator. Fuck, my arm is all bent up and fucking stiff. Alright, goodbye.